Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on automating your cyber workflows. We'll go ahead and get started to make sure that we get all the content in and leave room for question and answers at the end. With that being said, I'll give you a brief overview about EIS. We're experts in manufacturing computer systems with over 30 years in business and 20 countries served. Our consulting offerings include operational intelligence, OT cybersecurity, system digitization. Our services can be either staff augmentation or project-based, and we are system agnostic. With that being said, this is not an inclusive list of all of our services, so I encourage you to look at our website for additional information or reach out to Joe Cody or Kevin White. With that being said, a brief overview. Joe Cody will start us off with this webinar, giving us an overview on why automating your cyber workflows is a valuable action. And then Kevin White will transition into the demonstration. During the demonstration, please feel free to post any questions you might have in the chat, as Joe Cody will be monitoring that and responding to any questions. And then at the end of the session, we will open it up for question and answers, and please feel free to raise your hands. With that being said, I'll go ahead and send this over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Jen. So I want to open up by saying this is a continuation of a webinar we did back in July. So what we did in July, we had a paper workflow, paper process for the first part of an OT patch management program. So that little bit we did, it was basically a new or existing asset was being reviewed to determine if the asset should be added to the patch management program, if it should be decommissioned because the asset was leaving our control, our service, or if it should be excluded because maybe the vendor doesn't put patches out for it, or the vendor tells us we can't put patches on it, something like that. So in July, we had that paper workflow, and we said, hey, we want to digitize this workflow. We make this an electronic process. So we went through that. The big thing in July is that everything was contained within opstrakker. So the asset pool was inside of opstrakker. The data repository for when these were being reviewed and what their status was, all that was kept in opstrakker. And that's fine. There's a lot of companies out there that don't have asset inventory tool, or they don't have a formalized patching tool. They don't really have any of that stuff. So having that in opstrakker works perfectly fine for them. But there's also a lot of companies that do have an asset inventory tool, and they do have a patching tool. And so one of the things we want to avoid is having the users have to go to a bunch of different places and move information, even if it's just transcribing information or copying information into a bunch of different spaces. At the back end of the presentation, we'll kind of talk about that in detail. But in this webinar, we're doing the same workflow. The difference is now we're leaving the data in its respective systems, and we're going to integrate those systems with opstrakker to kind of show how we can start getting to a unified tool where we use everything in one. We let the opstrakker, the workflow, digital workflow, make those connections. So seeing is believing. So rather than me just sit here and talk to you for 30 minutes, I want to go ahead and turn it over to Kevin now and let Kevin go through a demo again. Kevin, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. And as we get into this again, I won't go all the way into the paper to glass portion that Joe mentioned that we did on the last webinar. I would recommend you go back and look at that, because to do this, you need it in a digital format. And what we're really trying to show here is that with the integration with opstrakker, your source of truth is your source of truth. There's nothing worse than asking someone, hey, what is that value? And the answer is, well, it depends. When you're trying to find a quick answer, you need to know exactly where that information is, and you shouldn't have to worry, are those systems synced up? Are they reading at the same time? You should be able to manipulate data and know that wherever you pick it up from, that is the current state of that. And so that's what we're going to use this time. And I'm going to show you from an operator endpoint, because as a solutions consultant, we want to use what you have in place. And the tool we're going to use for this is SolarWinds. And one of the modules within SolarWinds is our asset management tool. And so I'm going to share my screen here and take myself off and talk you through what we think is a way to make sure your source of truth maintains that and is utilized to the utmost. So everyone see my screen? And what we've
Yes,
got here is the nodes, and you can see we've got some information about these nodes. Last program update. So this is the last time we've gone through and updated this program, and it's giving me an update as we go right now. So this is a live system. This is actually looking into our, if you could, OIEDS, that's our group, the Operational Intelligence Group, is we're going through, and these are actually all the different nodes. So this is reading our system. So this is connected to our own system, and it's got a node ID here, and then our node name. I'll tell you, as an operator, I'm looking for a node ID if I want to have to fill out a form and manipulate these. Me fat fingering one of these values in is probably not going to work out very well, right? And then I can also see what is the patch program status. Now, there's other information that's going to be extremely important if I need to take this new asset, asset 7. Right now, it's an off-program new asset. If I need to take it through my patch management system, how is that going to occur? How can I update this? So what you'll see is we'll use the eForms. So here's our form we're going to use, and we'll enter some key information to start off this workflow. The first being the asset number. Again, I forget what it was, which one I have to change. I'm clicking back and forth in between screens. Again, the information is available to the operator where it's needed to be used. So I remember, oh yeah, it was 7 I need to look at. So I put in parameter value for 7. And this is additional information that's actually not stored within my asset management tool because I don't need that for the type of information that's being stored there. But for my patch management system and to make sure it goes through the proper process, I actually need to call out whether it's a validated or a not valid or a non-validated system because I have different actions based on those. So you can see I can combine information from my source of truth plus other information that's not available in that database, but maybe the human knows it, maybe it's available in another source, and combine those to make the decisions when I'm going through this workflow. When I save that information, it's now going to start my workflow off. And the first thing it's going to do is look at what does SolarWinds say that condition is. And this is my first chance to say, wait, that's not working right. And I can see it matches exactly what I had for 7. The time frame, off program new asset matches here. This is the REST API. The great part about this integration with opstrakker is nowadays, as we're talking about where our data lives, a lot of this is external systems that are collecting and doing certain things. There are softwares out there that are very specific in what tool sets they have available, but we want that information so we can massage that information. We can go through a process with that information, and then we can update that information. And that's really what the API allows you to do with anything that has an open web interface, again, using the proper security protocol. So we can read from this system what is the current status. Once I save that, the next question is, well, what do you want to do with this asset? Right. And so if you remember from our first presentation we gave, there's kind of a different brackets as what an operator would do. In this scenario, I'm going to add this asset. And since I chose to add or update this asset, it's now going to set me through a set of questions, right? And again, the ability of opstrakker to have these set of questions that then set up if-then scenarios, so I don't have to go through a checklist. I actually have a dynamic process that's built based on my answers. If I tell it's yes, no, yes, what should my next step be instead of having a human have to get there on their own? So I'll say that yes, all of these are in place. And now again, I'm going to be taken to what is the next step I need to take. So it did the analysis of the questions I took and the information I entered. It told me that I am now putting an on-program validated system. Now it actually tells me to do this. I need to add in a piece of documentation or else I can't save this because it is a validated system. So I'll select the attachment that I can upload. Another benefit of this system is the documentation of proof. So this is now captured with this report, uploaded. So when I go back and it says, well, how did you prove that? What is actually happening? We can go and look at that attachment. And I'll show you that later. I now save that saying I've completed that step. What we're going to do now is we're going to push this information back up to SolarWinds. And the first thing I'm going to do is the program status. So what just got updated is now going to get pushed to SolarWinds saying, hey, SolarWinds, that field that you thought was off program new asset, we've manipulated it. It should now be on program. And then the other part about when it was updated, instead of the previous date time group, use time now because I just did an update on this. I'll let it go through. You'll see there's no more steps to complete, and I can complete that workflow. If I back out of here, we're going to go to the home where we started. Let me refresh so it can get an update. And you'll see 7 now is on program with an update time of 12:10. So that loop allows me to pull a source of truth data set, manipulate it through a documented process, and then update the source of truth again with this. And so you may go, well, that's nice. You can change a bit. But here's where the real bang comes in here is if you look at the report, you can now look at the execution of every single time you took one of those assets through one of those procedures. You now have a history of what occurred. You have an auditable trail. In fact, if you want to, you can go within, and this is all stored within opstrakker as the metadata that shows how you made that manipulation and why you made it and who made it and what decisions were made, because you can have a visualization of everything that occurred, including every field that was filled out and what the information was in each of those, who entered it in, if there were any attachments that were associated with it. There's the risk assessment that I was required to put in. And here were any form parameters. Oh yeah, 7 validated system. So that summarization of all the other metadata is what you gain when you're manipulating this data, which allows you then to do quick audits, quick verification of process, and ensure that every time you're supposed to go through a procedure, it is completed. And you can prove that the reason you took the steps you took are this way. We're not removing humans at all from this process, right? We're removing the part where humans have to take something from one system and transcribe it to another system, because we're big believers that humans can do a lot, right? And if these two systems are literally, in my mind, web page tabs away, why do I have to communicate and write it down on one to write it down on another? Not a complicated guy. It seems like the electron should be able to do that for me. And so that's really what we're trying to do here is any part where these systems can communicate, let's let them communicate. And let's let them do the tools that they do really, really well. Because all of the things that SolarWinds is doing here cannot be replicated no matter how much customization you want to do in opstrakker. But what opstrakker can do is it can manipulate this and show you why you got there and do it the same way every single time. That's really all I have. What kind of questions do we have out from the group? Any actually, Joe, first I'll turn it back over to you for any insight and follow up on the demo.
Sure. So a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, we use SolarWinds here because they were nice enough to work with us and help us out with the REST API and building some of the calls. But to be very, very clear, this could be any asset inventory tool that supports REST API or any of the other integration methods that opstrakker supports. So we could just as easily have done this to Dragos or Nozomi or Industrial Defender or any of those out there. So I did want to thank SolarWinds for their help on that. The second thing is now that we've got this data into SolarWinds, we can do some really handy stuff with this, right? One of the things you're going to learn, if you're kind of new on your cyber journey, this probably won't make sense to you. But if you're a little further along, you'll recognize this right away. You go, oh, okay, yeah, I know what he's talking about. Whether you're following NIST or COBIT or ISO, any of those, there's some big stages along the way in cybersecurity, and there's usually tools that go along with those. So you have an asset inventory tool. You might have a patching tool like WSUS or FoxGuard or something like that. You may have a bunch of Excel sheets that's managing your risk management and risk output. You may have a tool for intrusion detection. You may have a tool for threat intelligence. You may have all these various tools. And so by the time you get onto a very mature level, you have a ton of tools. And almost every one of these tools has its own UI, has its own interface, web interface, whatever. And it starts to become very, very cumbersome in jumping between all these tools and pulling information out of one, putting it into the other. And that, I mean, I know analysts that just go into lock because of all the stuff they have to do. It's so much so that, in fact, at a lot of the sites that I'm embedded at, we have started building just navigation homepages. So we just built an OT web page on LAMP or WAMP that its sole purpose is just to have links to all of the various tools that you use. So one of the things I've been trying to do, and I kind of affectionately refer to it as my grand unified theory of cybersecurity, is to get down to as close to a single pane of glass as we can, right? Under no circumstances am I advocating getting rid of these tools. All of these tools are very, very good at what they do, but a lot of them realistically can be a back-end service. You really don't necessarily have to interact with your intrusion detection tool independent of your threat intelligence, independent of your asset inventory tool. That can all be integrated together. And that's what we're really trying to get to with our integration with opstrakker or whatever it may be. A single pane of glass is probably a pipe dream. I'm realistic about that. But if we can get it down to 2 or 3 tools instead of 8 or 10, I'm going to count that as a huge win. So when that was a long way of getting around to describing what I've got here. So now that we have our patch program status, we have our last patch program update, we can do some stuff with this now, right? In SolarWinds, we can build alerts and notifications off of this so that, let's say we decide we want to review every asset and its status on the patching program annually or every 6 months. We can build notifications off of that now. So it'll let us know in 6 months or a year that, hey, asset 2 there needs to be reviewed to determine if it's still applicable to be on program. Maybe something changed with the vendor. Maybe we had an asset that was decommissioned, but only because it was going out for maintenance. It was going to be gone or be taken down the line. And that requirement could be a regulatory requirement. So it could be coming from the FDA or NERC CIP requirement, or it could be an internal requirement. Maybe you have just decided as part of your cyber policy that you're going to do these. Either way, it has the same weight if you fail to do it. And we go back to opstrakker and we can see the history on that. From auditability and accountability, we can see that we did that on time. We know who did it. We know when it was completed. And it's the same thing with the patch program status. These are just 2 custom fields that I set up in SolarWinds, and the default value is off program new asset. So when SolarWinds goes through and does its automatic discovery every week or every night, however we want to set up, when it finds a new asset, it brings it in as off program new asset. Well, now we can have a notification that when our analyst comes in the morning and he's enjoying his cup of coffee, he has a notification that says, hey, overnight, I found 5 new assets. And so that triggers the workflow to go through and start figuring out what these need to be done as far as the patch program is associated with. So what we're really doing here, what I'm describing in an informal way, is we're optimizing our workflow. And that's ultimately where we want to get to. This whole life cycle over these last 2 webinars has been about, step 1, taking or defining your paper process, right? If you've already got it, great. If not, we'll work on it. Take that, go to digital. Don't try to make changes in the middle of doing that. Go straight from your paper process to your digital process. Once you get it in the digital process, now start integrating it with the tools you have. And once you get those tools going, now start figuring out, how do we optimize this? You'll pretty quickly figure out, once you've got the integration going, hey, we've got 5 or 6 steps in this workflow that we really don't need to be doing. We can let the tool do those. And that's the life cycle. I say all the time, I tell Kevin all the time, cybersecurity is a process. It's not a project. You don't go fire and forget and move on to the next thing. There's always a life cycle with almost everything in cybersecurity. And what we just described is the life cycle. It's the process for cybersecurity as far as workflow management. So hopefully that makes sense. The last thing I wanted to say is what we looked at here, and this actually dovetails nicely with the last statement. Each of the steps we had in this workflow, they were very, very deliberate. And that was for demonstration purposes, right? A lot of these steps can be optimized. You can be as detailed and deliberate as you want to be, or you can bundle stuff together and complete multiple steps in a single process. It's entirely up to you. The flexibility is yours. You can write these however you want to. And as Kevin, one of Kevin's favorite expressions, it's so simple a Kevin can do it. The authoring of the workflows is very intuitive and very simple. And I get the thumbs up down there. That's great. That's all I had. That's all I wanted to add. Kevin, I will turn it back over to you, my friend, for closing remarks, and then we'll turn it over to the floor for questions. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, not much else from me. Again, from the operation side, something that I do want to highlight that Joe jokingly said is this is again all low code, no code. This is meant to be easy and replicable. This is not meant to be that once you have this tool that you're going to have someone service this to even be able to use the tool. This tool is meant to be how can we quickly connect? How can it be utilized? And how can you use in other use cases? I mean, any form we're talking about here, this is now the list of forms becomes the overwhelming part of what you can do with this. So we're trying to make life easier for people who have to deal with this stuff, and we need them to do these type of activities correctly, because if not, in the OT cybersecurity world, as we know, when the digital meets the physical, people get hurt, and in critical infrastructure, people die. So this is extremely important things we're talking about, and helping analysts make sure that we're safe is definitely what EIS Cyber is in this for. Any questions from the groups? Anyone on board? Do we see anything in the chat? Joe, I know you're monitoring those.
Yeah, no, it's just been me talking to myself.
Okay.
Which is pretty standard flair.
Well, then that's all we have. Jen, if you wanted to close us out.
Absolutely. Hi, Tom. We want to take this time to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. We appreciate you attending. We'll be wrapping up the video and posting it on our YouTube page. So I will send it out to everybody who registered for the event with the link to the recorded webinar. Again, thank you for your time this afternoon, and hope this was beneficial to everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.